Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's author talk hosted by Cup of Tea with That Book Please, a blog website full of good reviews and recommendation, related news and reports, and original writing, and of course, tea. My name is Whitney, and I'm here with my co-host, Tabrija, creator of Cup of Tea with That Book Please. We will be in conversation with our special guest, Celestine Martin, author of Deja Brew, third book in the Elemental series. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We want to give a big thank you to you all. You could be doing a number of things right now, but you are here with us tonight for this virtual author event. And after our discussion, there will be some time for Q&A, and I will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions that come up during the conversation, please post it in the Q&A or chat box, and we will do our best to get to it. And we'll explain where that is on the next slide. And we, of course, this is being recorded, but you, the viewers, are not. So any links and resources shared during this presentation will be shared with you all after and also on the blog. And then finally, we just want to remind you all to please be respectful of all attendees and panelists. Next slide. Wonderful. So for those of you who are not familiar, we are using the Zoom platform, and I just want to kind of walk you through some of the features. I know this is, we may have all used Zoom or some other platform, but I don't want to make the assumption essentially. So we have the mute and unmute button. We do ask that if you are not speaking, please keep yourself muted. It cuts down on any ambient noise. You can show or not show your cameras, 100% optional, but you will always see your panelists' faces, and that is Tarisha, myself, and Celestine. You can chat in the box. We love active communication. So we're super excited. For whatever reason, if you are having trouble understanding with what we're saying, you can click that closed caption button for live transcripts. And if you want to keep it low key, or maybe just being in the chat is not enough, there is a reaction icon where you can send emojis out, send out praise, send out hearts. We love those. That's another way to be active and super engaged in today's conversation. So just take a couple minutes to familiarize yourself, and I will take the next few minutes to share some information about today's program. So Tarisha and I with a few of our other friends, co-host a podcast called Fake Book Club Podcast. If you are a fan of books, pop culture, and the power of friendship, check out Fake Book Club Podcast. Try saying that 5 times fast. You can listen on wherever you get your podcasts. Our first season is already out. We talk about our favorite reading trackers, horrible books, or what have you, nostalgia, and my personal favorite, K-pop. Plenty of time to catch up as the premiere of our second season is already out. And you can visit Fake Book Club Podcast at .wordpress.com, and I will drop that in the chat momentarily. And with that, I will pass it over to Tabrija to get started on this wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Whitney, and hello, everyone. My name is Tabrija, and yes, I am the creator of the blog Cup of Tea with That Book Please. And in the second series of this author talk, connected to the blog, I have the extreme pleasure of being in conversation with romance author Celestine Martin. So thank you, Celestine, for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. I'm very excited. You're my first event of the new year. Yay!
Yay!
So
That's
yay.
great. So hopefully this will be a great conversation, and I have a feeling it will be. So before we get started, I want to give a bio of our special guest. So a native in New Jersey, Celestine Martin writes whimsical and flirty paranormal romance that celebrates the beauty of everyday magic. She's inspired to write happily ever afters and happy for now endings, starring the people and places close to her heart. Her book, Wishful Thinking, debuted in 2022, and Kiss and Spell came out in 2023. Deja Brew, her third book in the Elemental Love series, came out in October 2024 from Forever Publishing. When she's not reading or writing, she enjoys organizing her massive sticker collection with her husband while spoiling their daughter in New York. You can find her on social media or check in on her website at celestinemartin.com. So thank you so much again for joining us. And I, what I really like about your books is just like the lovely way you title them, because you have like Kiss and Spell, Deja Brew, Wishful Thinking. Like, how did you come up with those titles for your books?
Sleep deprivation? Honestly, the titles are the last thing. They're the absolutely last thing because wishful thinking, I had this bright idea that I was going to name all of my novels after Sade songs. I don't know why. And so the first book was initially called No Ordinary Love, but then one of my fellow romance authors named their book that. So I was like, oh my God, that was supposed to be the original name of my book. But of course, my editor was like, my dear, it cannot be that. And I was like, okay, all right, that's fine. That's cool. That's all right. So, let that go. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to make them puns. They're all going to be puns of something. And so I came up with like 15 titles, and the last title was Wishful Thinking. And my husband's like, I bet they're gonna pick that. I was like, nah. He's like, I bet you they're gonna pick it. And they picked that one. They're like, that's perfect. And I was like, all right, okay. So that was it. And then Kiss and Spell. I honestly, I was like kiss and tell, kiss and spell, because but it also it leads to like the what both of the characters want, right? So it was play on words, and then Deja Brew. That was another one where I was just like, what am I gonna name this? What am I gonna name this? I was making a cup of tea, and I was like, Deja Brew. Oh my gosh, I got an email because that one was just I was just kept on throwing spaghetti at the wall for the titles, and I was like, I don't know what it's gonna be. And so Deja Brew came about. Luckily, because I was drinking tea, I'm a big tea drinker. And that's where it came from. So I was like, yay. So everyone was like, they're so creative. I was just like, desperation will be a creative force for you. So I was desperate for a title and then the puns. And then the next series, I'm like, I'm just going to name all my books after Death Cab for Cutie songs. My editor is going to get me, but no, I will figure it out. I'll probably come up with something punny. We'll figure it out. I do like puns.
My super quick before we go to the next question, but my dream is to write slash read a book based on dashboard confessionals
Oh my
to title
god.
entitle them. So
Oh my
they're not
god.
all sad, but I was just like, when you said Death Cab for Cutie, I was like,
I
we are
listen.
of the same mind.
That was my thing. College, I was just like, oh my gosh, because once I heard a lack of color on the OC, I'm dating myself. I'm dating myself. I was like, "Oh my gosh," and I bought the original soundtrack to the OC, and then I would listen to them, and then Transatlanticism came out, like, literally right before I was gonna go to college, and then it was just, like, the soundtrack and then everything out. I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's bananas." So, I love that. I love naming after songs, but, of course, there's a whole thing where it's just like it can either go towards it or not. Because I remember the Backstreet Boys romances. I remember the time period of romance where books were named after songs, and that it can be a little tricky because not everybody likes Backstreet Boys. Some people like NSYNC, some people like 98 Degrees, some people like ugh.
Did
So
anyone really like 98 Degrees though?
Did for
Oh
the
well,
two songs.
I liked her.
exactly.
I'm with her. Justice for 98 Degrees. I know. I know. That's why I mentioned them. They were there.
Well, low key, I can't remember if it was 98 Degrees or if it was Janet Jackson, but one of those two was 90. I saw 98 Degrees because they opened for somebody. I want to say they opened for Backstreet Boys at one time, and I
Right.
saw them. They opened for somebody,
Yeah.
and then Janet Jackson was, and that's when Usher came out because now I'm dating myself. But I feel like everyone compliments Shonda Rhimes for her amazing music choices, but she got that from the OC because the OC had a
The
banging
OC
soundtrack.
the
Mhm.
soundtrack like changed because it had a mix of indie, had this like why did Snow Patrol? Why should I, as a 19-year-old, be obsessed with Snow Patrol? Oh my gosh. Cause like I said, I was there. I was all about like, what was it? When Coldplay came out, I had parachutes. Do you know how many people have parachutes? Not many. Aside from Yellow, oh no. Oh my gosh.
You
I
sound exactly like my best friend.
That's a good thing.
Yes,
Yay.
because she was a Coldplay Incubus.
Listen, oh, Incubus, Morning View.
Oh
Oh
my
my
god.
gosh. That was just so
Going down memory lane.
Oh,
I know.
I
See, they
never.
don't know about this. Before you could go onto YouTube and do all this stuff.
Oh
No,
my
we had
god.
to wait for the album. The single came out, and then the single. And then I remember when YouTube came about when I was in college, and people were like you could just like watch videos or whatever.
I
And I
know.
introduced my mother to YouTube. Oh, she would just look up like old Broadway performances, and she'd be like, "Oh, it's amazing." Remember that, like that when YouTube had just first started, and I'm just like,
That's
"Oh
when
my
you can
god."
find TV shows and
My,
stuff like and like
oh
watch
yeah.
them, and it's like, oh wow, now they're copyright infringement and stuff.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm from the era that we can go back to our questions, but Shoes by Kelly. Oh my God, Shoes. And then she made a resurgence last summer. I was like, this is for us. This is for
Oh,
me
we
specifically,
needed
but for
this.
us.
We needed this. But yes. Sorry, I took us down a whole rabbit
No,
hole song
like,
titles with novel. That's coming back though. I've noticed that people are starting to name, especially now we're the Taylor Swift era. That is it because I'm like, damn, she does have some good titles to songs. Like, and
Yes.
her and like the her ability, because a lot of romance, I feel like a lot of romance writers are appealed and like her songs because she tells the story from beginning to end. Like Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Prince. You're telling me we're going on a journey. We're walking through that yearbook, Taylor. I understand that. And so that's why so many romance like readers and writers love Taylor Swift because she takes you on that journey. So I can see why people are like, I'm gonna name it. Like I know Abby Jimenez, Say You'll Remember Me. That's named
Mhm.
after Taylor Swift. You can see a lot of people like, oh yeah.
uh, super quick before we do have a question in the chat. What is your favorite tea? And we have some Irish breakfast, some lavender Earl Grey. I love lavender anything.
Like
And then lemon ginger is also a favorite.
oh, for me, like my husband got me a family size box of Earl Grey Twinings for Valentine's Day.
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, he's a keeper.
he
Listen,
knows you
I
so
locked
well.
him down 13 years ago. Yes. I was like, yes, right? And he was just like, he's like, Happy Valentine's Day. I was like, oh yeah.
To
Because I
be
was
loved is
like,
to be seen, or
was
to
it?
be seen is to be loved, whatever,
I know.
however that
Is it
goes.
white girls? You wifey right now. I'm
Um,
sorry, this interview is going
no, no, this is why we have this.
Love
We
it.
are here to talk about your book, but if we talk about other things, that's also okay. But the next question, which is going back to your book, is so there are two previous books in your Elemental Love series. Was it always your intention to have them connect with each other, or is it, or it just so happened to be that way?
Oh no, I wanted them to be interconnected, but who the books were going to be about, that was not that went off the rails. Because with wishful thinking, because I was like bring my books, wishful thinking, I knew it was about Lucy, my lovely years sadder girl who loves her tea and loves her merman. I was like, yeah, it was Lucy's book. Then as I was writing and editing this book, Ursula, her voice and her style and her just sass. I was like, oh no, because Callie was supposed to be book two. Callie was supposed to be book two. And so when I got done with wishful thinking, my editor was like, you know, you're going to have to write Ursula's story. I was like, gosh darn it. I know that. I know I have to. Callie was with the second book. It was supposed to be like she was supposed to be on campus doing her older like boss lady on campus type thing. And she has a rivalry with a fellow classmate. There was a whole thing. Like I had the outline, but it wasn't hitting. I was like, it's not hitting. It wasn't hitting, like Ursula got to me. And of course, I got DMs about Ursula, DMs on Twitter about Ursula. So when I wrote Kiss and Spell, I was out in the woods. I was just like, I have an outline, a strong voice character, and a prayer. And Kiss and Spell was definitely like, wow, okay. Like I feel like even though wishful thinking is a quieter book, I feel like if you are want to just take like I need to escape somewhere and I don't have enough money for a train ticket, I think wishful thinking immerses you in the world, but then Kiss and Spell you get to have some fun in that world. And then Deja Brew is just kind of like a love letter, just like the goodbye, and it takes place over the course of 2 years. And so it was always going to be that idea. Technically 3 years. Technically 3 years. So it takes place over 3 years. And so that's how it was meant to be. But it was always going to be a trilogy. And I know people are like, well, what about Callie's book? And I was like, I have an idea. I have an idea. And I'm just like, and trust me, my best friend and my brother are like, so people like, because they'll read the reviews. I don't read the reviews. One, it's a reader space. And two, I want to be able to create without feeling like, oh, okay. What'll this person say? I'm like, no. And also just the book's already published. It's already published. I can't change it now, but I'm aware of it. Whatever issues people have with the book, I know. Because I'm the type of writer where I was like, oh, I wish I'd gotten to rewrite that scene. Like I know. So reading the reviews, I personally for me, I feel like not in a good state. Just like not don't want to put myself there. And I think that allows me to be able to be as open and free with myself and be as generous as I am, because I'm like, I don't know what you guys think in my books unless you literally tell me. I'm 100% serious. Unless people come and tell me about my books, I don't go looking for it, and that has helped me. So,
Do
yeah.
you, after you publish them, do you go back to read like the final? I know like you technically wrote it, right? Obviously, but like once it like but once it's on a shelf and like it's out there for other people to consume, do you like go back and read it just to kind of see? Or is it like a people can't watch themselves on camera type situation?
I have, but it's months and months later because, like I said, I've read the book, I've written the book, I've read the book, I've written the book, I revised the book, I read the book, I read the book. You get past pages, you go through the book. I've already read it. At this point, I was like, I can't even do it. And you also kind of fall into this zone where you're like, you can't see the forest for the trees. Like I'm reading this book not as a reader but as someone who has to revise and edit and who has to make it better. So by the time I read the book, I'll read the book like say six months from now. I will read Deja Brew and then I'll be like, oh my god, this is pretty decent. Okay, same thing with wishful thinking. Like it took me 6 months before I could actually pick up the book and read it again because I had been so into it. I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't bad. I'm like, oh, this is a fun little book that I've written. Like, so yes. So that's where I'm like, I'll go back, but it takes like 6 months for me to go back because I mean, I started from a blank page to revision to writing and drafting, and then the process takes a long time. And so I had to step back because I was just like, no. But later on, I do read it, and I was just like, you know what? I I think I did a little something. I think I did a little something. So yeah.
So one of the questions that we wanted to ask is like, so romance genre we've seen like it expands more than just contemporary. It's
Hmm.
like historical, you have paranormal. So we wanted to ask like what gave you the idea to just write a paranormal romance instead of just, writing a more contemporary romance?
Um, the you know what? If I'm being honest, I love paranormal romance, but I felt like the paranormal romance that I wanted to read wasn't there yet. And especially something where I was just like, I want to read a book that feels like Charmed, but like the fun, goofy episodes. Like, oh no, Phoebe has a love spell and she made Piper do it too. Oh no, or a truth spell episode, right? I I saw the first episode of Charmed. I was deep. I was in it. So I was like, I want to write a book that feels like that, or a book that feels like also I'm a big Hallmark fan. Good Witch. I wanted a book that feel like Good Witch, but with black people, right? And so that was the type paranormal, and I would look for it and look for it, and I was just like, it's probably out there. I'm not seeing it, or it's not the type of book that I want on the shelf. I want that book on the shelf. So that's why I did Paranormal Rose, and also because of being 100% honest, the amount of people of color, especially black women, that are in paranormal romance, especially light paranormal romance, we know each other. We're like, hey girl, hey you go. Like we know each other. And in the indie space is bigger because indie is like you write what you want, you'll find your people. You will find your people. You just put up your flag, be like, hey, I'm writing about the Jessica Cage. She writes some really awesome, like fun paranormal romance in the indie space. But in traditional publishing, like I know the people who are like you're on the list with the people. It's like, oh, BIPOC characters who write paranormal romance. Like, right, it's small. It's not a huge list. They're out there, but it's not a huge list. And so for that reason, I wanted to add my voice to the paranormal romance space, especially when it comes to being black. I wanted to have like black witches whose magic was for themselves. It was super important to me that they weren't trying to save the world. They were just trying to save their sanity, save their patience, and try not to just, lose their sense of magic in a world that will strip it from you. That's what I wanted. And because I didn't see that the way I wanted to see it, I wrote it. That's why I wrote it. Because contemporary romance is extremely hard to write. It's extremely hard to write. Like I can get away with doing like a novella. I've done contemporary romance novellas like in my little notebook, but writing contemporary romance because what the biggest thing is like why can't they be together yet? Paranormal
Mhm.
romance, you can throw in a spell. You can throw in, oh no, there's a curse or an enchantment. Contemporary romance, he's like, he has father issues. I'm like, oh, do you want to write 400 pages of that? And I'm like, ah, you know,
I mean, no,
No, but it's true.
valid. Yeah.
yeah.
But it's funny to me because to me, and I guess this is showing my preference, or maybe not so much, but or and my preference, but also my ignorance is like when I think paranormal romance, I think on like the darker end of things.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
because
because
paranormal is strange and weird and a
hmm
little on the dark side. So having a um like a hallmarky feel good type love story being told, but it's still like witches and other and magic and all of that is very refreshing because I've only read like paranormal romance that's on like the darker end of things or Like it's
Same. Yeah.
dystopian or,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like I said, it's dark in tone, in everything's like a like underworld, essentially.
Yeah.
Listen, I was in the theater for Underworld. I was there. I,
So,
Because
I get it.
yeah, because I think it's like what is marketed towards us. Because if you go into like indie bookstores or what is like shown on websites, it is, yes, it is paranormal romance, but they're dark. It's like a world building, like, either something like a Court of Thorns or Roses and or the Hunger Games kind of thing. It's like that kind of it's like there's a romance, but there's also something else going on in the background.
yeah.
There's
Yeah.
like it's like what Celestine says, like they're trying to save the world or they're trying to upheaval, some tyranny. But sometimes you just want to read a cute romance and
That,
it's
that's
just
what I wanted because I was just like, what happens when you're like, what about the people who are just like, whoa, I'm not saving the world today. Let me go ahead and figure out what I'm making for dinner. What happened to those people who are just hanging around? And so, like I said, no knock against people who do write the high fantasy or the romantasy because mine is like, well, it's your romantasy. I was just like, not really. But then I think my stories fall under fairy tale fantasy, where I like to do a lot of motifs, like the true love's kiss, a merman leaving the ocean, a merfolk leaving the ocean, a witch who's trying to cast a spell to change her life. Those type of things. That's I love. That's because I actually found that term. I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I would love to write more of. And so that's where I feel like mine would be. But then, of course, my Freya Grove, the setting, the world that I've created, exists in the world, but it exists in kind of this liminal zone, right? So where magic can it's just freely there. Anyone who can practice magic can tap into the magic of Freya Grove. And so with that, I wanted to make sure that it was different because in the other paranormal romances, my shelf siblings, as I like to call them, my shelf siblings, where the witch was always othered. The witch was like,
mhm.
"Oh, I'm so afraid. I can't. No one can know that I'm a witch." I'm like, "No, not in my book. Y'all, they're gonna be spells out loud. They're gonna be doing this. They're gonna be hanging out. They're not doing any of that. I didn't want that. I didn't want that. And also keep in mind, they're black witches, right? So
Yeah.
their magic is not a source of pain, not a source of shame, but a pride. Because I'm like, I've got magic in my blood, like Kendrick Lamar. I got loyalty, I got royalty in my DNA, but I've got also other things. And so I wanted to make sure that the magic was always there. And they would be like, no, I am my ancestors. They were magical. There you
yeah.
go. That's what
Yeah.
I wanted for this series. And then so I was like, all right. But yeah.
Yeah. I think that's such a great way to put it. And we're gonna kind of talk about Serena's magic here. So Serena unintentionally wishes to redo an entire month. If you had a wish slash power to redo a month or a year, which would you choose and why?
I would do my daughter's second year over because I have a daughter. She's 3. She is adorable, bubbly, obsessed with the solar system right now. And I would redo her second year because it went by so fast. The first year was just like, woo, woo. It was just trying to figure like, oh, I'm a mom now because that was both of us learning. And then her second year went by so fast because once the first year is done, then the second year she's learning how to walk. She's learning how to talk. She's learning how to like communicate. And so there are some moments I wish I had just been able to enjoy because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just trying to keep you alive. That's kind of it. I wish I had like not I could redo that year so I didn't have to have so much anxiety and fear. So that's the year I would relive. It's just like in beautiful moments I wish I had been able to like slow down because of course Google photos that messy, what is always like, remember this memory? And I was like, she was so small. She was so small. Now she's like not so small. And so that's what I would relive. I would relive that year.
Oh, I thought you were saying something. Okay. um, so we wanted to ask, like, where does your inspiration coming from, like, comes from when you're writing these romantic stories? Because you said like Hallmark and you have like fantasy TV shows. Like, what else like it gives you inspiration?
Honestly, just paying attention to the world. Like, I love ephemera, things that are like only meant for a limited time, like ticket stubs or postcards. I always take a look in like digital collections of libraries. I love libraries. Like me, just randomly going to shelf. Love
We're both
libraries.
librarians, so
Librarians.
Thank you so much for everything because I am like me and my local librarian Liz, we're like this. Because I'm like, I'll ask her, I'm like, I'm trying to like this, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. But this book series, I was like, do you have any suggestions for this type of creature? She's like, I got you. And she'll help me out with resources, and she'll give me more resources. She'll talk like, how's the book going? I was like, awesome. Libraries, I'll go into a library, pick a random book, see a home, and take it. Like fairy tales always. I love looking at different JSTOR, going in and just saying like what's here. Library of Congress, I love their free to use stuff. I know the New York Public Library, they have digital collections, so randomly I'm seeing a postcard from like 1898 and I'm like, okay, all right, this might be a spark something. Pinterest, but unfortunately, Pinterest is overrun by AI stuff. And I'm just like, no, I want actual stuff made by hand, made by people, because I know what you can do with this AI. I was like, no, it doesn't have any soul. And but with the ephemera you can see the soul, you can see someone took time to upload it online, to photocopy it, to make sure that this thing is saved. And so I pay attention to things. I'm always like, I'm a junk journaler, I'm a journaler, so anything that catches my eye, I there's way too many scraps of paper around the house. There's index cards that has like one word on it, like goblin, Six Flags. I'm like, what is that? What was I trying to do there? Like, I'm just like, okay, eventually I'll figure it out. So that's where I'm at. I think just paying attention to the world and being curious. I'm just curious about things. And so I'm just like, all right, let me get inspired by that. Cause this next book series, literally, I have the tweet. I saw someone write on Twitter, like, do you remember the kid who would put together mud and water and leaves and call it a potion? And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is my next story idea. Goblin core. And darn it if it wasn't that idea that did it, because I was obsessed with it. I was just like, I used to be that kid. I used to be the kid who would be like, you know what, I'm making a potion today. I remember, and this is hashtag true story. I got a book from the library, how to make love spells. And I was like, I'm going to make a love spell. So I took roses and Valentine's Day and I took some vanilla extract. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I'm just looking at it and poisoned myself. And I boiled it together. I was like, yeah, it's going to make a potion. And I took a drink. I was like, what is this? And my mom's like, what are you making? I was like, tea? And she was just like, okay. It was a Momo love potion I found in a library book. And so that was me. True story. And so that I was like, I hadn't thought about that in years. And so I was just like, wow, that's my story. That's where this new series came about. And then so over the summer, I just got as many books about fae and goblins and brownies and elves and trolls. I mean, and I had them out for the entire summer and I made like this book just filled with information. And that information became like the basis of my new series. And I'm just like, and also watching Labyrinth. I love Labyrinth. I was obsessed with it as a kid. As an adult, I am doubling down, being like, let's make this happen. I was like, well, what if? And I was like, when I hear the words what if, my brain just starts going crazy. And so now that's I get inspired just by from the past, a lot of in the past, and just looking at what's around me or what interests me or what makes me like, there's a story behind this and I want to write it. So yeah.
I think we just proved you can find anything at the library.
Yes. I will I guess to totally for you to have bragging rights is that your book is checked out with a lot of holds on all three library systems. At least
That's
Deja
so,
Brew.
like, honestly,
So
gives me so much joy, honestly, because librarians, I have yet to meet a librarian who isn't like, your book's always checked out. Your book's already checked out. Like, even my mom, she went to our local library near my hometown, Neptune Public Library. And she was hilarious. She was just like, my daughter wrote a book. And they were like, oh, who's your daughter? And she gave a name. She was like, oh my God, we know her. We love her book. Oh, she's got to come down. And I was like, okay. So I went for a visit because my mom's like, see, they're going to find out that you're my daughter because they think I'm lying. I think they think I'm lying. I said, they don't think you're lying, mama. It's like, they don't think you're lying. So I went down there and they were like, people just love your book. I was like, the librarians, honestly, my career has been impacted so much by librarians because they've been absolutely wonderful and sweet. And they've been like, hey, and keeping my book on the shelf, which is super important. And I know that whenever I see threads where people are like, "Oh, libraries don't will do what? Libraries don't do what?" I'm like, "What are you gonna say? What's out of pocket?" Like I will get on. But luckily, all my other romance writers are like, "We got this," and they will just like it. You can delete this thread. It's time to delete this thread. Don't come for libraries. We will come for you. So I thank you so much. That means so much. Sincerely, that means the world to me to hear that.
So we want to segue to one of the questions that was submitted in the RSVP form for the event, and we have a couple of good ones. So the first one I'm going to ask is, someone asks, do you feel more pressure? Sorry, pressure as a romance fantasy writer to help people stay sane in these wild times?
Mm. What I realized is that wild times have existed for hundreds of years. And there have been books that have been like, why did someone write a humor book during this time? I can see why. I mean, Voltaire wrote Candide, and the world was a mess, right? And this was a humorous book, right? This grim humor. So I don't feel any pressure because I'm like I call I'm a naturally optimistic person. And so my optimism comes from the fact that what people have had to live through hard times and people have had to live through revolutions and it didn't stop people from creating. And so with there's no pressure. There's no pressure to keep it light because of course there are things that are going to be seeped into my work. With wishful thinking, it was about this idea because I wrote it before I had a child, before, during the first time our current president was there. And I was just like, I remember marching with my Black Girl Magic sign, and every Black woman was like, yeah, yeah. But I said, it's not enough to march with the sign. I have to embody it. So that's when I wrote the first draft. And I said, I want a place where my witches can rest comfortably. They don't have to worry about all these things. And that's where Frey Grove came in. That's what I wanted to do with my book. So I that the first draft came about. I managed to find a publisher who believed in it, and I said the one thing I wanted to was just like, hey, the witches stay Black. They stay Black no matter what. That like you make all the suggestions and anything you want, but these witches will stay Black, and I'm gonna keep it as light as possible. And because I said like my books are here not to be like, oh well, they deal with no, because we already have to deal with that already. I wanted this to be a place where you could read this book and be like, this is just a fun, silly, cute, adorable read that make me feel like what, why not? Just a place to rest. And so there's gonna be some things I definitely going to have to address. Like with the next book series, it's going to be a bit darker but there's still going to be love. There's still going to be laughs. There's still going to be a sense of sisterhood and camaraderie. But instead of like having that familia bond, you have the found family, where you have someone who's like, I'm the offbeat one of my family, but then I found my group. I found my family outside of it, and we're just goofy and we're just drinking wine, eating from our charcuterie boards, and trying to figure out how to crochet up a hat. Those are the vibes for this one because I feel like with this go around, I'm seeing the importance of community so much. And so this next book is going to be about community coming together, where the community was already built in this one, and you're joining it, where you see the creation of this community in the next book series. So there's no pressure because I know the type of writer that I am, and I know what comes to me naturally. And naturally comes from being like, if when you read my book, I want you to be like, up. Oh, she done another cute story. Like, why are you so adorable? Because it just comes to me naturally. I was born with it, like Maybelline. That's where I'm at. So, no pressure, no pressure because just it's naturally who I am. I don't have to force the levy because, as you can tell, I'm cracking jokes right now. I'm just a naturally like finding humor in things where I'm like, well, that happened. Plot twist. All right, everyone, let's go. So yeah, no pressure, just excitement. Because like I said, I'm like, oh my gosh, this one line. I was like, oh my gosh, he's fighting with her. He's fighting with her, but she's not ready for it. So thank you,
For those at yeah, for those at home, one of our attendees was like, "You're pure glitter and delight," and I 100% agree.
Emily.
Um, you touched on this throughout our conversations together, but I did want to kind of intentionally ask this next question. So in our current climate, and we all kind of know what that is, can you speak a little bit on the importance of telling these stories and romances that have people of color, but more specifically Black women as the main characters?
Oh my gosh, you even said word because I will say I had an interview with Substack with I think Simone Umba. I'm hopefully I'm not mispronouncing her name, but I had an interview and it was done right after the election, and I don't remember saying the things I said, but I meant them, and it was the fact it was important to me to make sure that Black romance, especially Black women in romance, are able to seen as fully formed people because you see Black women in media and it's changing now, thankfully, but before we'd be the sassy Black friend or the Black friend who give you that slice of wisdom with a neck roll, or the angry Black friend who's like, girl, you know he's not doing good. I'm like, God dang it, we're more than that. I know my aunties and my mama and my cousins and my friends, we're more than that. And so it is important to me that and I say they, that audience, that reading audience realizes that there's a spectrum of being a Black woman and being a Black woman in love and being a Black woman loved. Yes, she can be loved by a billionaire, a prince, a goblin, a merman. Everybody is gonna love Black because to love a Black woman in this world seems to be a revolutionary act. And so that's why my books will always have Black women being loved. Loved by a Black man, a Black goblin, a Black fairy, everything, but they're going to be loved. I might, if they really get to me, I'll do interracial too. I am out of pocket when it comes to because the one thing will never change. My Black women will be loved in my story. They will be cherished. They will be appreciated. They will be able to be magical and messy and ridiculous. And it's important because there are people who have been like, I read your book and I just didn't expect it. I expected something different. What? Come on, let's have a conversation. Have a conversation. Because if then we can talk about it. Because, like they said, people do like, well, I don't know what to expect from your book. Well, look at the cover. What do you think you're gonna expect? And they read it and they're like, that was unexpected. You're like, yeah. What did you expect? Because it's like, well, because the one of the things I hear, because there are people who will find excuses not to read. any book out of their comfort zone. We don't get that excuse. I couldn't be like, I can't read The Great Gatsby because, um, I just can't relate. What? No, I can never use that reason. I would never use that reason. I was like, I've had a library card since I was 3 years old. I remember this like, you better go ahead and read. If you read the book. Want to find out if you like it. But I think that it's important because there are a lot of people who are finding reasons not to read my book because they're like, well, but I was like, okay. And I'm also petty. I'm a petty princess with a crown. And I said, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna write, and I'm gonna write so well, and I'm gonna write so beautifully, and I'm gonna write that your friends are gonna mention my name, and all these book clubs are gonna mention my name, all the readers are mentioning until eventually you pick up my book, and you will feel embarrassed that you didn't pick me up sooner. That's the type of petty I am. Now, oh yeah. So that's why I think it's important to write it because there are people who are finding reasons not to read your stuff. I was like, I'm not worried about you because, like I said, I have libraries that can't keep my books on the shelf. I have readers who are coming to my DMs being like, I will read anything with your name on it. You know how powerful that is? That is ridiculously powerful. I'm not worried about the people who won't refuse to read my book. I'm taking care of the people who were like, listen, I money's tight. How can I support you? I said share, request you from the library, and when you have it, but thank you for your message. I get those messages. So I'm not worried about the people who won't read me, but the people who will, don't worry, I got something for you. So, and I'm gonna make sure you're taken care of. Sorry.
Absolutely not. I could have listened to that all day, all night. I was like, I'm just like nodding and it's like, yes, preach. This is like church for me.
My mom was a deacon at a former church. So
Oh, there you go.
so I get this from she, like I said, she's like, oh, you, my mother would preach. I was like, okay, mom. So that's how I am, where I'm just like, no, because you see the conversation. We see the conversations, authors.
Mhm.
And, it's frustrating where it's just like, you were missing out on some beautiful stuff because you feel like you can't. Who's telling you not to? What, how, the things I would have missed out on if I felt like this isn't for me. Give me that book. Stop playing around with me. Let me read this book. I'm like, you guys, I just can't, I can't. I know you're missing because you're letting other people, like the same thing with romance. People are like, oh, well, romance. I'm embarrassed. Who? Embarrassed for who? Who? You're missing out on some beautiful stories, some well written stories, some like
Yeah.
stories that have touched my heart. Be like, oh, I've got to email this person. There have been romances I have just emailed as a reader, as a writer. I'm like, you did the damn thing. Let me email you and say like, beautiful. I loved your book. Because we have to do that.
Yeah.
But it's people who are trying to talk themselves out of not doing things. I'm like, you're missing out on such beautiful stuff. And I feel for you. And it's, if
Mhm.
you're going to be a reader, read. And read without shame or embarrassment. As you try to
Mhm.
embarrass me, I'll embarrass myself. Let me start reading this book out loud on the train. Because I'll out embarrass myself. People trying to embarrass me. Like,
And we're New Yorkers, and so no one cares. No one is paying attention to you.
no one is paying
Exactly.
Like,
attention.
and
You
as it, go ahead, sorry.
no, no, you're right. No one's paying attention. And I feel like, especially like for me, if I'm reading something, if I'm enjoying something, I'm gonna tell someone. But I feel like because some people think that reading needs to be a performative act, if they're not reading the right things, if not reading the best thing, if they're not reading this, like no, like you read what you want, and then if you want to share the book, that's fine. But when reading becomes an act that you have to feel, you have to show out to other people, all of a sudden people are like, you like that book? I hated it. And then you're like, oh, well, yeah, there were problems. I'm going to like this book. I'm like, yeah, no, I like this book. So what of it? But like I said, we grew up before, like the rise of all the TikTok and everything, all things. Because if you like the book, what are you gonna do? You're not gonna go on to Goodreads and argue down. Well, 40,000 people didn't. You don't have like, listen. I like the book. You didn't like the book. That's fine. But let me get off my soapbox.
It's
Get off my soapbox.
okay. But that leads to a perfect next question that was also submitted to the form that when I saw, I would really like to hear your opinion on it. And they asked, how do you feel about special editions of books? Pro, ambivalent, or against? And would you ever want to have a special edition of your books made?
Oh boy. See. Because I'm just like, one, special editions need to be emphasis on special. Because the thing is about it, we're going to enter in a big time of uncertainty when it comes to publishings and books. Let's be completely honest. Let's call a spade a spade. And for that reason, when it comes to special editions, people are going to have to decide whether or not they're going to be able to afford books. And so with special editions coming out, it's making people decide, okay, do I want the special edition of a book I already own, or do I spend my money on a book that I really want but isn't a special edition? And so you're having people make those choices, right? And so if you're going to do a special edition, the special edition has to, in how do I say, it has to develop or add something to the reading experience. If this is a special edition, I'm getting either an exclusive story that is not online. I am getting artwork that has been specifically commissioned for this, never before seen stuff. Nothing being hinted, nothing being leaked. All right. If anyone wants to see it, hey, there is some TikToks out there. But if you're gonna make it special, make it special. Make it like they get to rediscover something about the book that they hadn't seen before. That's what I think when it comes to special editions. I don't think that I'm like, oh, down with special editions. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying it has to enrich. There we go. It has to enrich the experience for the reader. And it has to, because for the money that they're paying, it has to be like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable seed. Or hey, this was the pitch, the original pitch for the story. Like, oh, this is the author's original notes, or this was the original first chapter of the thing. Something that makes it hashtag special, right? So that's it. For me, I would love to do a special edition for when it comes to wishful thinking and the elemental love series. I would love to do that, right? But it's also like how, because before I was a writer, I'm a reader, right? Before I became an author and became a writer, I was a reader. I read first. So I'm thinking about, as a reader, what would I want to see and what would I be willing to pay for? And so because of that, I would be like, all right, I would have to do something dope. I would have to do something where you're a special edition. Guess what? We're gonna make it so like, oh, you're getting like a Freya Grove care package or something involved with this. Because when it comes to special editions, it has to be like breathe new life or give new depth to the book. That's my opinion. That's just how I feel. Because sometimes you see like, oh, it's another special edition, and it's just like, that's all they changed.
Is like
Okay.
sprayed edges and stuff. And I'm like, that's nice and everything. But I'm like, what else do I have? Because it's like I sprayed edges, like that doesn't really, it looks nice to carry around, but I'm more, it's like you said, like I want more of an experience. I want more insight into the book than I am reading. Like notes that the author may have had, or
Mm-hmm.
like an exclusive short story or something like that. But yeah,
That
sprayed edges, that's nothing.
Yeah, something that enriches the reading experience, because I think that that would make it special. Where it's just like, oh, I got the special edition, and okay, she added, the first chapter, or she added this, or we get like a checkup, or like there are things that I was like, okay, if I was doing a special edition, I would definitely do, but it it would be a process, and special editions also cost money. That's another thing, and unless they know that you have an audience for their money. I mean, there we've seen the special editions like, oh yeah, no, that person's gonna sell out. That special edition is gone. It's already done. And then there are people like the people who are making the special editions. It's a numbers game. It's like I think people forget publishing is a business, And is this good business to make a special edition of this book? Do you have a built-in buying? That's why pre-orders are so important for people. Okay, we got a pre-order, having pre-orders to show the demand is clear for this story. And so that's where it is. It's a numbers game too as well. Like, is this special edition gonna sell out, or are you gonna be sitting on surplus copies? Yeah.
I I think for me, I'm not like a special edition type person, but I do love to get my stuff signed. So a lot of my newly added collection has been stuff that have been signed by the authors, signed by the creators in some way, shape, or form. And I think for me, that's more mean, for lack of better wording, more meaningful because it's just like this is the book that we got, and
Yeah.
I have it because it meant something to me. And to me, I don't really need like the extra story unless the story is unfinished in some way. That I mean, I've been harassing this, and not harassing, but every time I see her, I'm like, can we collaborate so we can finish the story together? Because I need it to be done. But
Listen, I've heard her be like, "Oh, so Callie's story?" I'm like, there's 60 pages. I have notes, but it's just like I'm working on a new series and it's the whole thing. I'm like, yeah.
well, that can be in your new edition.
I don't
Like
know. Y'all,
this
y'all will be
60
like,
pages of that.
I could maybe I can do a novella, but a whole novel, I don't know, y'all. And I'm like, what? I said I could do like a
I think
novella. We'll see.
I think people really want it. And obviously on your timeline, I
Yeah.
think a novella, if people want it bad enough, they will take it in whatever form that they
Yeah.
can get it. I and there's nothing to say that you can't tell a complete story in a novella format or in a shorter format.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, for Callie, because Callie's pretty like she's like I said, each one of my characters are connected to an element. Lucy is water, Ursula is earth, Serena is fire, kitchen witch, and then Callie is air. So hers is the hardest story because she is the most just kind of like woo one of them all. And so the guy that she ends up with, oh my gosh. Like I said, I wrote like 60 pages because it was like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. But then it's also like, ah, the series is done. So, but I know there are people like, well, what about Callie? I said, yeah, but Callie's okay. She gets her happily ever after, but then her happily ever after is comes her standing into the life that she had. Because she is the one who's kind of like, she's a late bloomer. She went to school late. She's the one who also has she's dyslexic. Yeah, she's dyslexic, and because she's dyslexic, she struggled in school, and it was hard for her because both of her parents are like academic types, and they were doing everything they could to help her, and she's just like, I'm just not getting it. And even though she's like ridiculously smart and ridiculously brilliant, there's definitely this kind of sense of just frustration that lies there, and like, all right, you keep count me out, you see what I can do. And so she made a promise to her grandmother that she would go back and finish school. She does. And so now that she's kind of figured out like, okay, I got my wish is done. I did what I needed to do. Now, what happens? What happens when you've done everything you're supposed to do? What comes next? And now she's like, all right, I got my business. I'm doing this. And so it's just like, I know where her story starts, but then it's like finding the time to finish the story because then I'd have to go back into the world of Frey Grove. I'm not in Frey Grove right now. I am fully in this new series, and I'm just like, I'll be right back. Just hold, sit here, have a cup of tea. I'll be right back. And then gotta run over and finish this story, and then come back and finish the story, and then I have to finish the next story because I literally got my contract last night. They no, last month. I'm contracted for 3 more books at Forever in the new series. Yeah, I know. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, that was a surprise. I was like, oh, okay. So in the new series is like so different. It's like this, you still got the cute vibes, but it's definitely like once upon a time storybook, but not confusing. I watched the first season of Once Upon a Time, and I'm just like, are we just making things up right now? We're just making things up. No, because I love the idea. Because I remember my grad school professor. She was like, "You will love this. You will love this series." I was like, "Okay, great." And I'm like, just making things up.
I dropped it after like the second season, I think.
The like the first 3 episodes, I'm like, y'all are just making things. You have so they had such potential, and I'm like, you're just making things up. You're just connecting so this and this and that. And like, once they had Elsa from Frozen come on, I saw the ads. I was like, no, 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 mm-mm, mm-mm. I'm out. I'm done. I'm never
Because it
watching the show.
because they kept trying to connect it with the Disney film. That's what my felt feeling was. Like they kept trying to connect it with not the original fairy tales, but with the Disney versions of the fairy tales.
And so with me, through me, when it comes to this next book series, you're gonna see a lot of like fairy tale motifs because it's basically, hey, what if we explore? Because I said, well, Alexander, no, not Alexander, Xavier, kiss and spell. What if we went and said, like, okay, well, what happens if you have more of that? I'm going off of the kiss and spell vibes. So where I'm just like, it's gonna be definitely cottage core. It's going to be like labyrinth inspired. You're gonna have this academic offbeat black woman who's come to this town and she like just immerses herself and there's literally magic everywhere. And she manages, it's like this whole thing. Like, I can't say much because they haven't made the announcement. When they make the announcement, then I'm going to be out here being crazy. I don't care. But I definitely want to get into that because like I said, I want the cottage core. Like when like I'm all about finding the hashtag like black girls in cottage core because I want to write us in spaces that I know that we love. You know, like black girls know how to crochet and sew and be creative and do stuff. And like we're there. I love to crochet. I'm a crocheter. My husband's a crocheter. We're crochet people. But it's one of those things where I'm just like, you don't see it. And if you do see it, it's like on the periphery or black girls dressed as princesses and fays and all these things. Like that's what I want to do, where I'm just like, I'm going to have that populated and I'm gonna have it's just like make sure that I have all the fairy tale vibes that I want. All the fairy tale vibes. So that's for the next series. That's what I want.
Well, our next question was going to be about what other projects, but since you can't talk about
Right.
it,
So this is what I can
so
do. I can say this. It's in, if you, it's a lighter version of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. That's the vein I'm going in. Where it's going to be lighter. It's definitely going to be, it's like, here you go. Fairy Tale Academia. Bam. That's it.
I mean, okay, so that's all you
That
can
sounds
say.
awesome.
And it does sound
I'm
awesome.
ooh,
We cannot
I was like, oh, I want to talk about it. I want to talk about
we
it. But it's also like they haven't made the announcement yet. We're finalizing the announcement notice. And I'm just like, listen, I am ready for it. But and it's a lot of, like I said, research. God bless my librarians. Because I already told Liz, I said, Liz, you get an acknowledgement. Just get ready. You're getting acknowledgement in this next book because it's been a lot of reading about fairy tales and reading about fairy tales and also the psychiatry behind fairy tales. So like women who run with wolves and this idea of like, well, the how fairy tales have been used. Like either they've been dismissed or they've been used to reinforce cultural norms. Oh, we go there. And so
Mhm.
I'm just like, okay, there's something here. And that's where I feel like a lot. And this whole, it goes into a lot of the conversations that I want to have about softness and just like, oh my gosh. So that's what I'm trying to do. I know but I have 3 books. Thank you, Lord, knock on wood. I got 3 books to kind of explore those things. But the first book is definitely giving fairy tale academia. So,
we do have a couple more questions left. I know Tarisha likes to be, and we are gonna play a little game to be kind of crazy. But before we transition into the game portion of this, I wanna ask one final question. So we've all we're reading or have finished Elemental Love series, and while we're waiting for your new series to come out, what is a book or books that we should be reading right now?
Oh, the book that I really enjoyed, that really got me into the whole fairy tale fantasy, has to be This Fatal Kiss. I don't remember the author's name, but it's a queer YA story. Romance is really good. I was just like, this is exactly the vibes that I want to do. And so it's like with Slavic mythology. And I was just like, okay, all right. So I really enjoyed that. Because I also like to, when I'm writing, I have to read outside my genre. Yes, that's the author, Alicia Zankic. Yeah, she's really good. I followed her on Instagram. I was like, oh my God, it's great. Um, Scam Goddess by Lacey Mosley. Very funny, very silly. But then it also talks into the idea of just like listen, if you have to scam your way through life, go ahead. And you're like, once you realize that life is a scam, it opens up. And I'm like, yeah. Once you realize that, oh, the game is rigged, let me see what I can do. It was very good. I listened to that in like an afternoon. That was a good one too as well. What's another one that I read? Yeah, but those are the books that I've read recently. I finished Emma Klein, The Guest. Yeah, it was very interesting about this woman who basically scams literally her way in the Hamptons, trying to like evade any type of responsibility. And it was just like, I was like, the ending was just like, as a reader, I'm like, oh, I wish I had more. But as a writer, I was like, I see what you did there. I see what you did there. I was like, there is no other way the story can end. But I was still like, am I missing a chapter? Am I missing a chapter? No. So those are the books that I read. Like I said, if I'm writing romance, I have to read something outside of my genre because then it's like, this person did it better than me. Oh no. Because oh no. This fatal kiss. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so we do have a little game that we play with our authors, and it's, this or that, and it's a bookish edition. And we do encourage people who are attending to play along as well, so you can put your answers into the chat as well. So, paperback or hardback?
Paperback. It fits easier in my purse, and also I have to have at least 2 to 3 books in my bag.
Yeah, I think the librarian within me says hardback. Says hardback will last long, but I do get paperback. What about you, Whitney?
Paperback, it's less heavy, but then again, you will probably ask this question in one of these this or that's, but I'm mostly an ebook person anyway, just reading it on my phone or tablet because I don't like to carry things. So one less thing to carry.
Okay, read one book at a time or read multiple books at a time.
Multiple books. Yeah. Because like ebook, either ebook, like paperback, and then audiobook.
Yeah.
Yeah, because just to switch it up, especially if I'm out on the bus, I'm going to be able to have a book so I don't have to make eye contact with people. But I don't want my phone out because sometimes there's like, I remember there's one woman on the bus and she was trying to make eye contact with me. She was like, she was in the mood for a fight. You could tell it. It was in the eyes. And so I was just like, I had my book up, my writing craft book. I was
It's like, stop looking at me.
like
Stop
she was
looking
just
at
like,
me.
you see the eyes like. Like, look at me so I can fight you eyes. I'm like, oh no.
Oh
So books, that's why I carry books in my bag. Because just in case, because you look at your phone, you're like, oh, I have to turn off my phone to get off the bus. But with a book, you're like,
You're just like, hi. He's like, no, no one's gonna talk to me with a book in my hand.
My my ignore game on public transit is very
I,
strong.
I mean, she wouldn't stop. She was, I don't know what happened, but she was ready to go. Like, what are you looking at? I'm not this.
See me, because I love to fight, and that's the fire sign that I am.
Oh no,
I'd be like, what
I'm
are
an air
you
sign.
looking
I'm
at?
gonna
What are
whisk
you
myself
looking
away.
at? What are you looking at? I have time today, even if I don't actually.
I'll
I'll
make
make the time.
I love fire signs. I'm married to a fire sign, so I understand it. They're like, oh no. You're like, oh no.
Okay. One POV or two or more POVs.
Oh boy. Because I like getting in other people's heads, so double POV. Anything beyond that, that's just I get lost. I get lost as like, okay, what are we learning being in this POV? There has to be something because I know some romance authors are like, well, I can't get into the guy's POV. And I understand that. For me, I like being able to show both of their journeys, especially when it came to Deja Brew. Gus was recovering from having a broken heart, being in love, and I wanted to show him starting to fall back in love and trust his instincts again. And so that's why it was important to me to have his POV. Though I could have written it just from Serena's POV, I was like, same thing with the next book series. My hero, he is going through a lot, and so this idea of grief, moving on from the past and being able to embrace it. So I want that POV so that readers can be like, "Oh my gosh, I get that. I understand that." So yeah.
Hard copy or ebook and audiobook.
Oh boy. I'm gonna say just because it's helped me be able to get more books, ebook and audiobook. But hard copy, I will if I'm like I need this book to have it, like to have this book on my shelf, I will buy it. But when it comes to being able to read a book, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna read this book, I'm gonna ingest it, I'm gonna write it down, get information from it, audiobook, ebook. Just for like, especially when it comes to research, hard copy
Yeah.
away because I have to physically have it. And it's like, oh, what's a way to be able to find fairies? Okay, I gotta go look in that book that I saw one time, or a lot of when I was world building Freya Grove, a lot of it hard books because I need that. Especially if
Mhm.
I'm on the screen all day and I do a research day because I have off and on days. Like some days, like today I didn't write because I've been writing. I'm almost at 20,000 words after having to start over after writing 10,000 words. So it's just like I needed a break. My brain was like, so hard copy for research, but for like enjoyment reading, ebook, audiobook.
Yeah. I've gotten back into listening to audiobooks, especially if I'm walking or commuting, because it's just easier to do that. And also just shuts the world out for
Uh,
even if it's like a couple of minutes or so.
yes. Ooh, excuse me.
Um, Read in bed or read on the sofa or couch.
Sofa. I'm like, let me get my blanket. I have like what call my comfort stack. I gotta have my snacks. I gotta have my thermos. I gotta have my tea. I gotta stretch out. I gotta be able to see my plants. Gotta get some sunlight. That's what I do. Like I gotta read myself. But in bed, if I can't sleep because insomnia is real, I will sleep. I will read on my phone in bed because no,
Mm.
I don't want to wake anybody up. Yeah.
Okay, this is a dangerous one. The library or the bookstore.
You already know what the answer is, library. Because the bookstore, I'll be honest, some of these bookstores, I remember there was a time where when you came in to a bookstore and people would give you some nonsense about romance. I've been reading romance since I was 12 years old. I am down. I am in this game. So some of the bookstores, I'm not going to name the bookstore out of respect, but one bookstore used to refuse to carry romance because they thought it was above them. Then I go on their Instagram page and all of a sudden, oh wow, they're stalking. Hey, romance readers, come come and get your favorite book here. I was like, oh, somebody changed their tune once they saw that romance readers, they roll deep. They
Mhm.
roll deep. And if you will one respect them because and there's still some bookstores that are a little like they think it's beneath them. Those are readers. And the thing is
Mhm.
about it, romance readers just don't read romance. We read everything else because we are inside. We love it. We're voracious. And so for that reason, libraries, because I've never had anyone scoff at me for reading romance at a library, but in bookstores, and now they're coming along now that they're seeing it and they're seeing the community romance will bring with them. Yeah, but every bookstore that has hosted me absolutely treated me like a rock star, wonderful, sweet, generous. There are a couple of bookstores that need to come along and they need to be opening because you wouldn't scoff at somebody who was looking for S.A. Cosby. You're not gonna scoff at people. There are people who like USA Today best time, New York Times bestsellers, but you scoff at them. Okay, yeah, but that mess.
So speaking of romance, we can
Mhm.
go to favorite tropes. So friends to lovers or enemies to lovers.
Friends to lovers, because enemies to lovers, like enemies to lovers used to be like, I cannot stand you. You are da 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 da. Insert the blank. But friends to lovers, there's something sweet about it. Like I know you and I love you as you are, because like my marriage, friends to lovers, started as friends. Then it was just like, ooh, I like you too. Hey, yeah. So, but
I
enemies to lovers. Now, most of the time, enemies to lovers is like rivals to lovers. It has to be done right too.
Yeah,
yeah, it
true.
does. I think I roll with enemies to lovers because my first enemies to lovers was Pride and Prejudice, and that's my favorite book of all
This
time. And then
that's the goat. That's the standard. You're like,
yes,
if you have to do better than that, and I'm just like, come on now. That's the standard.
I
Everyone's like, oh, Pride and Prejudice. I was like, yes, Pride and Prejudice. Like it's just like because I'm reading Persuasion.
that's like the goat second chance. And it also
Thank you.
oh, I
slow
love a
burn
second
romance.
chance romance.
And I'm a slow burn girl.
Yeah.
I love slow burn. But Persuasion, I was just like, Lord, I don't need to do a Jane Austen homage. Don't let me do it. Don't let me do it. Don't put
Do,
that idea in
why
my
not? Just do it.
head.
Just do
I
it.
Listen,
just do. I
Nikki
think
Payne did it.
no,
I,
mm-mm. You're trying to get me in trouble because those Jane Austen girlies,
to
I'm
read
one of
it as
them.
a
I'm one of them. So
yeah,
you write it, I'll do it.
very
I'll
harsh.
try to be nice.
like, it
Just
can't be like,
try to be nice.
it would be Smershman. That would I would have to like dress it up
Oh
and
my
something. I
gosh.
couldn't do it because Nikki Payne, when she writes to Jane Austen, she is out here being like, "Don't come for me unless I send for you," because she knows. Because her and I, like, I'm originally a Bronte girl. I love Brontes, but we'll go back and forth with each other. But I can tell you, the Jane Austens, they are like they ride deep. And I get it. I understand it, especially just reading her work because I read Pride and Prejudice a long time ago. I was like, all right, but Persuasion is because I'm a slow burn person. I love a second chance. I love the type. Those are definitely one of my favorite tropes. But I would be like, no, Bronte. Bronte is like, oh boy, that's where I'm at. Because Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, oh yes, I love the atmosphericness of it. I love a good setting. But yeah.
They do. The Brontes did do a good setting. The romance, however, is, in
And
my opinion, is kind of toxic. But
oh, all the way, Catherine and Heathcliff, they are not couples goals.
no,
They're
they're
not
not.
relationship goals. Oh
No.
no. Even with Rochester and
And
Jane, I was
Jane.
like, he had a whole wife in the attic, sis. That is like a
Exactly.
TikTok
I would
video.
have been out, like gone. Bye. Like, moving on.
About to get her man. I was like, that is a whole situation you do not want to be a part of, love. So I understand where it comes from, but I mean, that enemies to lovers to the point where it's just like they literally do not. That is a reasonable, because when it comes to enemies to lovers, what I find that people are like, oh, we had one conversation and I just didn't like you. No, she is fundamentally, you ragged my family. Nope. And she go deep. You can tell. She's still like, you mess with my family, you mess with me. You trying to play about, oh, like you can tell she does not like him. And then he has to overcome that thing. And she changes his mind by job, all this stuff is all this inner work and play that enemies to lovers works. It is pitch perfect, right? And then now you have a whole generation of romance writers who were trying to write that, and I'm just like, good luck, y'all. I'm not even gonna touch it. Like, I'm gonna back up. Let me move, slow moon walk away. I'm not trying to touch that.
Sometimes, like with Austen, and I feel like with Austen retellings, they try to mimic what Austen did. And that's not the intention. It's like you have the atmosphere and the sense of the story that she was trying to convey, but just don't mimic what she did, because you can't be her. You can't
You
be Jane Austen. We already had Jane Austen. We have her work and stuff. But I can appreciate a retelling if
yeah.
it captures the atmosphere and the ambiance and still the sense of the story, but also putting the author's original spin on it. Like their voice. I want to hear their voice. I don't want to hear Austen's voice, because if I want to hear Austen, I'll just read the original novels.
And that's it. And that's where you have to be able, because you don't want to parrot her. You don't want to parrot her, but you want to pay homage. And that's a very tricky line to pull off, right? Because there are a lot, because you see the amount of romance novels that have been just inspired or influenced by Pride and Prejudice. There's a whole genre behind it. And so that's where you have that trickiness, that tricky balance, because you will always have that original. Like that's a touchstone. And so you're just like, wow, like that's why for the people who do retellings of those stories, I'm like, that's God bless. I love it, but it's also like it's a tricky thing to do because you have history there. And yeah.
And I have one more to ask, and that is series or standalones. And your answer should not influence because you have a series and another series.
See,
Okay.
that's the thing about it. With I'm gonna say
Don't hurt
because
yourself now.
well, this listen. When I've like spent 1,000 pages writing these 3 books, I was just like, when it comes to a standalone, that would take me a long time. Like at least I'm like, oh, I have another book to figure it out, or I have another book to tell the story. But standalones, because people ask me, can you read your book standalone? I was like, yes, but the problem is you're gonna want to read the others, and they're like, okay. I have yet to have a reader tell me that they have it, and it's not because they're like, oh, I said no, because you're gonna be like, well, damn, what happens next? Or I'm like, how did we get here? Because people really found me through Kiss and Spell. And they were like, is this the first book? And like, no, there's another book. Like, there's another book. And then Deja Brew, is it your first book? Like, no, this is the third book. There's more? I was like, yeah, there's 2 more. and then they'll go and they run it. You can read them. You can. There's enough in there that you can read them, but then you're gonna feel like, well, how did we get here? And that's how I feel because I'm a trilogy girl. Like I grew up, my mom loved Star Wars, so we would always watch the original trilogy. You know, New Hope. You know, Empire Strikes Back, all the stuff. So I love a trilogy. Standalones require so much. Oh, it takes a lot. I think it can be done, and if I did a standalone, it would be a contemporary. Because I have an idea for contemporary. I love beach reads, and I would love to do something like in the vein of Emily Henry, but with let me see a bougie black girl doing something fun, being like, let me have my rosé, let me do this, like something that's just fun and bubbly and light. I would love it if that was be a contemporary and it would just be that. But that's for maybe the next one. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. And also, people are starting to hear about me and be like, "Hey, Celestine, we've got an offer for you," and I'm like, "Oh, it's beautiful to be booked and blessed." But it's also like, I have to sit and write this now. Which is a good problem to have. I'm not taking it for granted. It's a good problem to have, but it's also like there's so many stories that I want to write, and I'm like excited, but then it's also like, when do I have the time to do it? Oh, good times.
I when it comes to, I'm a manga reader, so the shorter the series, the better for but I highly recommend, well, actually, no, I can't recommend it, but Boys Over Flowers is one of my favorite enemies to lovers
As my
stories.
brother-in-law run a comic book shop, so I will do that because I know Fruit Basket. She just gave me a big omnibus. I'm like, I was gonna take this is like a summer break read. I gotta clear my plate off to sit because I'll just devour it. Manga, I love manga too.
It's so good. I will say I was introduced to that series as a in the Japanese TV show, and then the Korean reboot, and then the Chinese reboot, and now there's a Thailand reboot, and it's all terrible. Like it's there's enemies to lovers, and then like the MC should really be in jail. Type of enemies to lovers, but
Isn't
it
it
is my favorite. It
like,
is
listen?
in real life, I would never, but I
No,
just
but
fall for that
listen.
story every time.
Beautiful thing about fiction. You can with fiction. There you go. Like I'm here for me. I'm always for like fated mates. I'm always here like marry my husband. These did you that series on Amazon? I'm still haven't watched the last two episodes because I'm like, it's not over for me if I don't watch it. It doesn't end in my mind. I will stop watching a show because I was like, no, I don't want it to be over. I don't want it to be over. So,
You, yeah, in that case, you should watch When the Phone Rings because it's very much, it's on Netflix. Everyone should watch it. The last episode is not great. I'm not even gonna hold you, but it's it's a man, it's pseudo enemies to lovers, but it is a man who does not play about his wife. And that to me is my
I'm
ultimate
here
favorite trope.
for it. I'm here for it.
So everyone should watch it. It's on Netflix if you have it, um, or wherever it is you watch your Asian TV shows that is not on a national streaming platform. DM me if you if you want some links. But so we have two more questions
Okay.
um, for you. I'm gonna ask the second to last one, and it's our final submitted question. And that is, has your writing approach changed over time over these books? If so, how?
I've gotten quicker because Wishful Thinking took off and on 6 years to write because I was working full time. And then the pandemic hit, and then I went on submission with it. And so it got picked up. And this is a life cycle of a book, apparently. Got picked up in 20. Yeah, I got the contract for 2020. yay. And then they're like, okay, we'll come back to it. We're gonna put it on hold for a year. Okay, put a hold in a year. Then I had my daughter, and they was like, okay, we're gonna have to push it back another year. I'm like, okay, all right, fine. So they pushed to 2022. And so then it was like all this notes. It was a single page line of notes that I had for this book. And I had to rewrite the book from top to bottom. And then I lost 2 weeks worth of work. And here I am sobbing with a whole baby. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, my husband was like, one day you will tell this story and you will laugh. I was like, not right now. But thank you. But now I'm like, oh, thank you. But then I had to redo the entire book. And I was like, okay, so editing that book. Now, Kiss and Spell, that was 6 months, but they broke it up into two halves. So I went from taking 6 years off and on to write a book to now having to write a whole book in 6 months. I would say I'll give myself an extra 3 months, so about 9 months, which is the fastest I've ever written a book, which is like ridiculous. But by then I knew the voice, I knew the way I wanted to tell a story, but I need time. I'm a type of writer who is, what is it? Some people are pre-made writers who are like they have pre-made bread. They can just bring the bread out. I am a like making a sourdough starter. I everything has to come like from formation, from like you're getting homemade bread, you know. So it takes me longer to be able to put together. But once I'm in the zone, I'm in the zone because like I said, I've been researching. Once I get a head start on things, I can research, I can start doing things. Same thing with Deja Brew. Deja Brew, I wrote over the course of the summer. I was like, it needs a lot of work. But then I got it back. There was an issue and I had a month to revise it. So I revised Deja Brew in a month. And then even as it was like in arc form, because people are like, oh, the arc, we're lucky we got the arc out. Trust me. Because it was just like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So one, I've managed to be more ruthless. If I know something's not working, I'm not going to sit here and spend weeks trying to make it work. It's gone. Like for this version, I said, okay, my next book is due September 1st. They need the book September 1st. So right now, I don't have time in between taking care of my daughter, taking care of the household, taking care of everything, working on things. I have to get this book done. So I wrote those 80 pages. I'm like, it's not working. I got to start over. So I start over from the beginning. Now, it took me 3 weeks to write those pages, but it wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. But then I ended up writing 80 pages in a week because now I knew what to do. So I'm able to let things go quicker. And I'm also to be able to recognize it. All the missteps and the mistakes and the mishaps that happened with my first three books have helped me be able to write a better draft. My first drafts are a whole mess. Most of the things that people like in my books comes from the revision because either I'm too close to see it or then with my editor. Because people say, oh, your editor. I said, my editor tells me what's wrong and then she trusts me to fix it. That's how we do. Because I'm the type of person where I'm like, I know how to fix it. And that's where being a good reader makes you into a better writer. Because I've read enough being like, oh, I know that in the book, Joanna Shoup, A Daring Arrangement, I know that she did this in this book. What can I do in my book that will make the scenes that she had sing? And so I'm able to identify it and be like, okay, this is what I can do. Or I'm like, I love the way that dialogue worked in that book. Let me go ahead and do it. So that's how it's changed. I'm much more like, this ain't working. Bye. Or I'm like, delete, delete, get out of here. Or I'm like, I recognize I'm like, I'm boring myself. Oh boy, this is boring. But now, oh, I'm like, when I'm smiling, I'm like kicking up my feet. Like, that means it's working. So that's how my writing has changed. I'm much more ruthless, much more cut to the quick, being like, it's not working, start over.
Wonderful. So we are at our final question. Please stick around. We do have a couple of things to do our little outro, but this is our final question. Preemptively, thank you for your submitted questions and your wonderful, thoughtful answers, Celestine, to our questions. And thanks everyone for attending. So we like to ask this, both Teresa and myself like to ask this of all of our authors. So it's not just you, I promise.
Mhm.
um, we are librarians, and your book is already off the shelf, so it's not like we have to do anything. But we do like to ask our authors to do a 30-second elevator pitch as to why people should read your book, check out your book, buy your book. And I will give you the floor, and you can start when you're ready.
Well, first, hi, Celestine Martin. I write light paranormal romance with black leads. And I think you should read my books because I feel like there's space for lightness and joy and fun and romance in the world. I like slower moments. I love slice of life, and I always love being able to say like, "Hey, delightfulness." Right? I want to be able to make space for that because where there's times where you want a heavier read, sometimes you just want something light. Sometimes you just want something that just is going to give you a little bit of fun. And so my books provide that. And also, it's a world that's kind of like our world, but just a little bit more magical, a little bit more fun, a little bit more cozy. And so I feel my books, especially the Elemental Love series, shows that world can be and exists. It's a world full of magic, it's a world full of family, and it's a world full of just like summer days, autumn walks and spring flings. And so that's where I think that my books would be perfect for you. If you're looking for that, if you're looking for a cozy magic, if you're looking for a lighthearted read, and if you're just looking for swoony romance, check out my books.
Yay!
Is that my
That
first
was
time?
perfect. No, it's perfect. Because we've had yours was perfect, but we've also had people like, this is my book and you should just read it. so, so
Oh,
that's also an option.
I'm a talker. I'm a talker because and also
We are not
believe.
complaining, I promise.
Oh yeah, no. I am a talker, as you can tell. But then it's also like once you've like had people in person ask you like, why should I read your book? And I'm just like, well, this, and they just leave me like, wow, okay. And it's just like I kind of hit my buying budget right now. I was like, here, take a sticker or take my card, check me out. Or I'm like, go to my TikTok page, and if anything about that interests you, go and check me out. Like, especially when people give you the kind of like, you're very nice, but I don't have enough money anymore. I'm like, that's okay. I get it. I've been there where I'm like, the stack's getting too big at the library. Where I've got like, I don't know if I can carry all these books home. Oh no, I made a mistake. So I've been there. So yeah.
Well, that was wonderful. So thank you, Celestine. And thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. This was amazing. Deja Brew and also Celestine's other books are available to purchase wherever books are sold. We're going to drop a few links in the chat and see where you can buy them in your area. But we wouldn't be doing our due diligence if we, as librarians, didn't tell you to go support your local library by borrowing a copy that way. And we're going to enter the link into the chat, this WorldCat link, where you can find your nearest library and can have all the location where you can get Celestine's books at your nearest library. Also, please take the time to join us next month. We don't have a special guest, but we are going to be celebrating 10 years of Cup of Tea with That Book, Please. I can't believe it is 10 years after this. And the tables are going to be turned where I'm going to be interviewed about my experience with this blog and running this platform. So we're going to enter that link into the chat so you can RSVP. That is going to be happening Sunday, March 16th, also at 6 p.m. So also register for that if you want to hear my insight of running this platform. Also follow Celestine on social media. She has a website. She's on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky. Follow her on all those platforms, and also follow us on Cup of Tea with That Book, Please. You can subscribe to the website. Follow us on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and also on Substack. And also you can follow the Facebook Club podcast on Spotify. We're going to enter that link into the chat. I know I'm entering saying all these links, but don't worry, they're on my website, and I will be sending out these links to all registrants as well. So thank you, Celestine. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful night.